Thank you very much, everybody, to being here today. We have a special webinar, Leading in Time of Crisis, and our speakers are International Past President Elizabeth Benham, who also was the National Federation of BPW USA President, and Mariela Caminelli, who is the president of BPW Valletta Malta, who also went through many difficult times and served many times as a mediator. Thank you very much to all of you for being here, and thank you for our great speakers for your kindness to accept to be with us today. Thank you. Liz, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dowidge, for your vision on these webinars. I think they're hopefully valuable to people. And thank you, Anne Hilty, for always being there to facilitate and make it so professional. Okay, so I've been asked to speak about this topic called leadership in a crisis. And so I think the story, I'll begin the story that begins with passion, purpose, and success, followed by lack of knowledge, arrogance, and finally failure, with a critical and heavily loaded word called leadership. So this recount today brings back many memories for me into my own journey navigating through many leadership issues. It begins with the passion of one woman who then inspired many to form an organization of women for women to develop their potential. In 1919, in the United States, the National Federation of Business and Professional Women's Clubs was officially launched. Years went by with much joy, hard work, sacrifices, and perseverance through the World War II wars. Those years. And finally, by the 1950s, the organization was increasingly active in legislation, and after massive fundraising, it culminated in 1956 with the purchase of a building in Washington, D.C. It was a historical building, and it was located on 2012 Massachusetts Avenue. It was built in 1899. This became the membership's headquarters for the United States. And at that time, our membership had reached to about 300,000 members. 28 years later, in 1989, 2012, which was our headquarters as we named it, needed renovation to update the old building. $3 million was scheduled for it. It actually far exceeded this financially. And so in 1989, a new loan had to be renegotiated for approximately a further $1.7 million, which ultimately could not be met because of many factors, including declining membership. The leadership at the time, without reaching out to the members' voices in this financial crisis, used a designated account for international dues to pay the debt. The members at the time, the members' dues in 1989 to belong to an international organization was $2.40 and had recently been increased to $3 at the international level. So in 1989, 1990, 1991, and 1992, 4 years in total, no dues were paid to the international organization. And therefore, in 1992, according to the rules of the international organization, the United States Federation had to be abrogated. It caused a huge split in the organization. There was much dismay amongst the members of not belonging to an international organization, not fulfilling the promise of empowering women worldwide, and many other factors. Disappointment in the leadership of the organization. And it also developed much animus between the members, among members, for the leadership, and it was not a good scene. So in 1993, the international organization changed its bylaws to allow the states and clubs within the United States to directly get their membership into the international organization. This was immediately followed by California. They were the first. We had New York, we had Wisconsin, and we also had Pacific Rim that were state federations that joined the international, along with other clubs as well. There was one in Paso del Norte, Texas, and in Chicago. And this is how we continued on. In the meantime, BPW, or the USA Federation of Businesswomen, had continued with declining membership. The situation did not get any better in terms of the feelings between members. And so in 2008, the Federation declared bankruptcy. In the meantime, there had been some transactions where the Federation actually assigned the building that we had in Washington, D.C. to the foundation. It was set up as a nonprofit 501c3 for accounting purposes in the United States. And so the building belonged to the foundation. In 2001, the organization decided to sell the building. The net, the sale amount was about $7.3 million. And the net amount that they gained from it after expenses and so on was about $6.5 million. And at that time, the membership again was very angry with what had transpired. And those who really wanted to be with International decided, myself among them, that a moral debt was obligated to pay to the international organization, and that after all this windfall of money, that the foundation should pay back the debt that was owed, which was at that time $382,441. That's what actually happened as the final debt that they accounted for. And we felt that it should be paid. It was obligated. There was contractual agreements made when you sign up with this kind of stuff. And however, the leadership in the USA just dug in and would not. They just would not. Many things were promoted to try to reconcile and come back as a country federation. At this point, again, we were still only a few state federations in the country. And I particularly started a fund called the Reconciliation Fund. I put in $1,000 and I put it out to all the members. And I said, anybody willing to put in $5, put it in, and we will make our bid to reconcile with International, pay back the debt and so on. None of that really was supported. At our national conventions, it was motions that I put in place at the national conventions were not approved, didn't get much discussion at all. And it was really the animus from the leadership at that time that filtered down into the members, and disinformation made it even worse. In 1998, because the statute of limitations was running out, the international organization had requested, repayment of the debt as any business should do on an annual basis, but never had any negotiations. They wouldn't negotiate, they wouldn't do much. And so in 1998, the international organization filed a lawsuit against the United States to regain the funds. This created an even deeper rift. It was thought by the members what a terrible, terrible thing the international did to file a lawsuit. Much more disinformation was propagated around, and it was just a very, very bad situation. So fast forward again to 2008, when the USA, the lawsuit, just incidentally, was deemed, it didn't go anywhere because the statute of limitations had run out, which was the fear that had happened. It was 1998. It was filed, and it was filed in New York, and there is a law that you have a statute of limitations on when you can proceed with that. And they ran out the clock. The USA leadership had spent a lot of money, or probably about $55,000 on legal fees to fight it. They never really wanted to sit down and renegotiate or even reconnect with international. It was just that the leadership that created that. And so that's where it went. 2008, after all these years, it went bankrupt. The foundation got the building and finally sold it, and made all this money. So when the USA went bankrupt, I, at that time, happened to be, having served as the vice president of international and then as serving currently as the international president, filed immediately for a trademark in the United States called EPW. It was called Enterprising and Professional Women. Why did I do that? Because the year prior to 2008, the USA Federation had trademarked the names BPW and the words business and professional women. And so we were not allowed to use it. They had tried to launch an issue with asking for licensing fees from each member would have to pay $40 in order to have access to the programs and the name BPW and Business and Professional Women. It caused an even more uproar amongst the state federations and the clubs and the members who had been members for many, many years, who had fundraised for the building, who had poured all, put all the money into that building, got the money, and it was all squandered. By the way, the reason the USA went bankrupt after receiving $6.5 million is that the leadership decided to put it into the stock market, and the stock market had a huge financial crash, and they lost $3 or $4 million almost immediately, and the rest of it was squandered with moving out of the building and paying for very expensive staff, a CEO that was earning approximately at that time about $250,000 a year, which was a huge amount. And so the money was just eaten up very, very quickly. Really bad management, very bad management. So basically, when all this happened, I immediately, knowing that there was no way we could reconcile this ever again, decided to form the organization as EPW and filed for it to become a country and national federation again with international. That was very successful. And so from there, we began to build very, very slowly, again, a new federation. I happened to finish my international presidency, and then pretty much was drafted into the national presidency. But I want to give a shout out to one person here who began that process from EPW to when I took over as the national president again. And her name was Bessie Hieronymus. I had never met Bessie Hieronymus, but I'd heard about her. She had been the president of California, who was the first state to step up and join the international organization directly. And Bessie Hieronymus took over the role of the president of EPW and carried us forward to where we had our first national conference in Las Vegas, where we formally launched the new national federation under the name EPW. Bessie finished out her term. We had another president who took over. Her name was Trish Knight. She had done a lot of work in leadership in terms of the individual development program, which BPW USA finally shared with international. And Trish did a one-year term, and then I took over and was drafted as the national president, which I then served for 5 years. During my time, we then we went, and it was a very difficult time because people were so confused with these names. I mean, we couldn't use BPW. We were under the name EPW. We functioned as a business and professional women's organization with all the historical background that had been developed for so many years. I mean, the legacy that we left with legislation for women in the country was enormous. And so that seemed to be completely separated from the new federation. How could we actually use that as having, ours, the archive of our organization that we created? Most of those members were still there. So this was a very long and difficult time. But eventually I decided, and there's some members who really raised their voices on this, that we should get our old name back, which was BPW. But we couldn't, because the 3 letters are trademarked and still are trademarked in the United States. So in doing some research, I found out that our original name, the National Federation of Business and Professional Women's Clubs, was never trademarked. And because it then constituted 5 letters instead of 3 letters, and because it was a longer name, National Federation of Business and Professional Women's Clubs, we were able, we trademarked the name and the letters. And so we got our logo back, our name back, and finally cleared the way to begin building again this fabulous federation in our country, which celebrated in 2019 100 years that we had been around. So I leave you with just some thoughts on what I call the critical parts of leadership. Leadership is serious. When you take on that oath of being willing to serve an organization, it comes with the commitment to having vision, compassion, humility, having the idea of sustainability. And it comes with the absolute commitment of putting personal feelings aside always and functioning to serve the organization as a whole and all the members in common. And it is leadership's responsibility to create harmony, to build harmony, and to strengthen what was given to them as a gift and an honor to be able to take and develop and leave their own legacies. So that is what I think are the critical areas of the requirements of leadership, and how when someone takes on a leadership role, you have to understand that it's going to be historical. Whatever you do and whatever you don't do, and whatever you achieve and not achieve, will be in discussion for many years after that. And so here we are in closing on a new foundation of developing an organization and trying to put together, put away all the bad feelings, trying to put forward the prospect of having an organization again built on 100 years of really empowering women, affecting legislation that advocates for women, and to be bonded worldwide by womanhood and by the joy of the friendships and all of that brings. So I'll leave that up to some questions at the end, and I'll hand it over now to, I guess, Anne or Yasmin, who's facilitating our next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Very interesting situation and very difficult. And I would like to introduce Mariela Caminelli, President of BPW Malta. Mariela, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yasmin, and thank you for inviting me to participate this afternoon. I am going to share a PowerPoint presentation so that people can follow a little bit as to what's going on. My topic today is successful mediation. What is mediation? It is primarily comprised of 5 steps, which include introductions, and we'll go into this a bit later on, statement of the problem, information gathering, identification of the problems, and bargaining, and finally, settlement. Introductions. Introductions basically is a meeting between the mediator and all the parties involved. It could be either everybody together or a one-on-one basis, depending on how comfortable everybody is with each other or how heated the situation is. If you have everybody at the same time and everybody's trying to introduce themselves, you can find yourself in a situation where everybody's talking over everybody else. In this meeting, the moderator or mediator introduces herself and her role, and the way it also she would like to handle the mediator. There will also be a statement by the mediator of the issues involved, and also identifies to all the parties, we already mentioned the process that she will follow. Every mediator tends to work in a different way. I think what are the key important role and traits of a good mediator is to remain impartial, is to try to maintain the emotions as much as possible. You don't want to show partiality with any party, because at the end of the day the goal is to find a solution where everybody is happy with or walks away from the table where they're happy. The next step is the statement of the problem. Basically, each party will be given the opportunity to explain their side of the issue and their side of the story. The request should be that you ask them to provide a brief and also to support their side of the story or the situation of how it evolved. Most of the time, and especially with the last one that we did, we asked for copies of communications. If there was a legal attorneys involved, then you ask them to present communication, copies of all the communications. What is important is that the mediator actually goes very carefully through all the documentation, just so that she can familiarize and inform herself of what the situation was up to that date, right? How it evolved and how each side is viewing the issue at hand. So, as I said, usually the mediator will ask for a brief of each party detailing their side of the facts, of how they perceive it and how they perceive what happened. Ask for the supporting documentation, which, as I already just said, usually is, email correspondence. If there is legal correspondence from either side, that should also be included. Going through the documentation, a good mediator will ask questions and ask for clarifications from each party so that they can actually better understand the situation at hand. And then we, as a mediator, you need to identify what the reasons of why the actions have or continue to be taken. Sometimes you will find that there's either a slight misunderstanding or a slight difference in the understanding of the situation at hand. It could be either a language barrier, or sometimes you are so family focused that you will see things one way, from your end. Once you identify what the problem is, the mediator, like I said, they will review everything, all the supporting document, as well as the responses to the questions. She will then schedule meetings with each party from each side, and she will discuss with them what she feels the issue is and hear them. It's important to hear what is coming back at you, what the responses are, what the feelings are. Once that is contributed, this could take a number of meetings. Probably it could be more than one meeting with follow-ups, asking them to get further clarifications, and then you will have the follow-up meeting and come to a situation. Once you understand the situation better, then you start trying to formulate and propose a solution as a mediator to each party on a separate basis. And you see where each party is willing to give and take, right? It's a matter, mediation is basically a discussion of a give and take, of what you're willing to give up and what you're willing to walk away with from the table. The mediator will also organize private meetings with each side to hammer out the negotiations, because when they are just the mediator and the party, and you could have a consortium of people, you can have a group of people from each side, they can speak more comfortably. They will give you their reasons, and they may also give you an indication as to what they're willing to give up to end with a peaceful solution. And this is where you brainstorm together, right? You find out exactly what they're willing to give up and what they're willing to walk away from. And the mediator role includes also the threading carefully through the emotions, because as you can imagine, usually when you get to a mediator being involved, there's a long history of discussions, communications going back and forth, and sometimes there's even a lot of emotions and serious emotions involved. When you go through all of this and you have all the information, then you have the settlement, right? You propose a settlement where each party is willing to walk away from the table with. I think in every sense, the most important key to a successful mediation is that every party involved walks away feeling comfortable that they have gotten the most that they could out of the situation. You have a bad situation that you're trying to resolve and resolve amicably. The other thing, it's impossible for, I think everybody will understand that's impossible for all parties to get everything that they set out to get in the first place. The goal of a mediator is to make sure that both parties walk away with a comfortable and acceptable result from the mediation. As we said at the very beginning, you don't want to appear that you're siding with one side or the other. And this is where you make them feel that they have succeeded, and that this is also always a win-win situation for all parties. Because when you have one party walking away feeling that they have, how am I going to put this, in the short end of the stick, right? They didn't get everything that they were hoping to get, or at least, at minimum what they're hoping to get. This thing will never go away. They will come back, they will find something else to start arguing about. That was my short presentation. There are many, we can go into details, but I'm hoping that we'll have questions at the end and you can go into them further.
Okay, thanks, Mariella. And if you can take us out of screen share, that would be great.
I am going to try to stop.
Okay, great.
There
So
we go.
we'll open up to questions in just a moment, but first I have a question or two, so I'm going to pull privilege and ask mine first. Liz, first of all, for you, would you also take a minute or two and talk about the work you've been doing in the last few years to help to heal the relationship between what's now two BPW groups in the USA? So you've been working on that.
Yes, thank you, Anne. When something as hurtful and as deep as this goes, it is a really, really steep climb to get out of this. Why? We're a voluntary organization, and people put in time, effort, money, passion. And when that is like disregarded, when you have this collective vision of building something wonderful, and it goes away because of poor leadership, really, I would say, just attitudes and personal feelings that get in the way, it becomes very difficult to rebuild again. So what I tried to do was just focus on who we were, focus on the accomplishments, focus on the fact that we need to build again. We can build again if we absolutely just put aside the personal feelings and get on with it together, because together we are definitely stronger. We have still got clubs and state federations operating in this country that do not belong to us. And that because there are still such bad feelings out there because of what they perceive the international did wrong, which International did absolutely nothing wrong. They suffered the most, actually. In the short term, in the long term, we suffered extensively. But because it was still the feeling and the animus was still there, people can't get past it. The three things that really caused the leadership to affect this in their personal feelings was really very bad information. They believed that the USA, because we were at one time over 300,000 members, was paying the whole bill for the International. And we were the largest federation in the world. However, the way it was structured with a sliding scale of votes, we did not get votes that they felt represented 300,000 members in this country. That was a huge issue, but that's what they used to defy the fact that the bad debt was there. They used that as an excuse to say, well, why should we pay all that money and not get a vote? And so it was those bad feelings that were this disinformation that was put forward that created an animus towards the International. And the members said, why do we need it to belong to an International? I mean, why? They didn't seem to feel that there was any value. And I would take heed on that even today. We need to make sure that our members do feel that there's value belonging to an international organization. Currently, nationally, in our country, USA, we pay most of our funds, our dues, out to the International. We keep very little. So there's this balance that needs to be struck. And again, it boils down to value. What are we doing for women that creates the value that they feel the bond and the passion to keep building on something? Because again, voluntary work requires it to be recognized, to be appreciated, to feel respectful. And all of those boils down to the critical word called leadership. It's a heavily loaded word, leadership. I hope that answers your question, Anne.
More or less.
Well, it's a very, very long story. There are so many
Yes,
aspects of this. This could take hours and hours to discuss all of the different things that went on here, but this was a brief summary.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and one question to you, Mariella. Without giving any names or too many details, could you give us one example of one of the negotiations you've been involved with in Europe?
Sure. So basically, there was one club, part of a federation, who was operating independently. It seems there was a partial issue of leadership, in the sense of people who were in previous leadership and the current leadership, and they weren't seeing really head to head. They were going at loggerheads. And at the end, it ended up that the things escalated so significantly because of part of the work that was being done by one of the members of the club, that the federation decided unilaterally, after several warnings, several letters coming from attorneys and internal communication, sorry, that the club was being thrown out of the federation. That's basically what was the issue. This took months and months before us as a mediating team came together. And at the end, sorry, my voice is going. At the end, I think everybody gave up a little bit. The club itself, I think, gave in a lot, and I think they understood the fact that some of the decisions had to be made at the federation level, and the club was taken back into the federation. So now they're all back as a whole. That is part of what I can reveal at this point, without, I think, going into legal issues.
Okay, great. Thank you. That gives us a concrete example. Wonderful. Okay, I'd like to open up the floor now. If you have a question or a comment, please use the raise hand function if possible, because that also puts you at the head of all these 2 pages of windows and I can find you more easily. So if you don't know how to use that, then if you don't have your video on, you'll have to turn on your video, but just do this and hopefully I'll see you. The ones with videos are also near the front. So we have a lot of people, but I think that will work. Sylvia Begata first.
Thank you, and for giving me the floor. First of all, thank you, Lid, and thank you, Mariela, for your magnificent expositions today. I have a question for Mariela. Just this, we had a case in Spain that with one of our associates that it's similar that the case that you have been exposing, and we have to try to use the figure of a mediator, and it was really impossible to use this figure because the other part was not willing to hear because it was impossible. She was not willing to hear. She was saying all the time that she was in the right side of the truth, and it was very hard for us. And the board member has to take a decision. It was similar at the case that you were explaining, and it was very hard for us, but we had to take a decision at the end. And I would like to ask you your advice for one case as we are dealing right now in this federation.
Can you hear me? Yes, yes, yes.
It was very hard for us.
Yeah, I think sometimes, I don't know if we've already gone through this step, but involving somebody who is not part of the local organization or who's not involved can actually open doors. Because the person, if they are a good mediator, they're very good listeners, they're very empathic, and they can also, they're very capable of drawing from both parties what they're willing to give up or what they're willing to accept. And that is the key of a good mediator. If you don't have a mediator who's willing to do this, listen, not just to say one other thing, not all mediations end up successfully. There are a lot of mediations, as we know, from every aspect of life, where they end up in court. They don't always end up, successfully. But if you have a good mediator, and that's the key, it's somebody who understands the issues, is not tied to one side or the other, and can have a frank conversation with either party, then I think you have a much better success. If you haven't already done this step, right, I would recommend it. See how far you can go between the two parties and then go to the mediator, because at the end of the day, I think it will also improve the acceptance of a settlement and also improve relations. Yes, there will be some bad blood, there always is. But once they understand exactly what each part is going through, you probably can end up with a situation where things can go back to, well, maybe not at the same level as they were before this started, but close to it.
Yeah, and I understand, but the law is the law, and all the clubs have to fulfill the law, and it's very difficult when the law is not. It's going when you don't go with the law, and that is the key.
That's my recommendation: is try to go to that step. You don't want, especially within BBW, our goal is to lift each other up, right? We're here to support each other and lift each other up. So before you go to a finite stage where you say, this is it, you're out of here, try to find a solution, try to find a mediator. I would recommend somebody who's not from Spain, because otherwise they'll be too close to either side, but try to find somebody who can empathically speak to either side and find a way out how to resolve it.
Yeah, but after 7 years, I think it's enough.
I'm sorry, I
7
didn't-
years. 7 years.
Yes.
We
Well, the
have
one
tried
we were,
for 7 years.
yeah, well, the one we were dealing with has been going on for 3 years. So it wasn't 7 years. You do have a lot. But if you haven't done it, I would try it. You've got nothing else to lose at this point, except time. Yeah.
No,
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Sylvia.
thank you.
Can we go on to someone else now for another question or comment? Question or comment? Do I see any hands? Okay. Has anyone else here, I'm going to call on individuals in a minute. Has anyone else here had a conflict within their club or federation that they can even just share some part of it with us? Particularly how you solved it. Diana.
Yes, and thank you for the floor. First of all, I'd like to congratulate both speakers, Liz with this extensive explanation of PPW USA problem, and which I didn't know. I mean, I knew that they were out, and I knew there was a problem, but the details of the problem, I wasn't aware of them. And also Mariela with the mediation tools, I think is very useful for leadership. I also agree that leadership is a very difficult thing. I mean, it's not easy. I mean, people, I don't know why people look for it. I don't know why people look to be in power and to lead things, because it's not easy. I'm experiencing this in the regional coordination in Latin America. You have to put in game so many ways of behaviors. It's not always something that I wouldn't. I mean, once, sorry, I'm not being clear. I wanted to be president of my country. One day, I mean, I don't know who didn't in Latin America. Everybody wants to be president, but I worked for it. I followed studies for it, and I was candidate for twice for different positions to become one day president. And now only the idea makes me sick. So I can tell you that it's not. You have to practice leadership to know what it means. So I agree with Liz. I had to come to my problem. We have a very difficult problem in my country because they are no longer a federation, PPW Ecuador, because they didn't pay. They were paid for, and they only have 37 members. But we have had problems from the international leadership. So I have been struggling with it. We tried mediation, we tried speaking to them. The clubs within the country have tried very hard to have them review their position. But now there is an executive, but there are no clubs to lead. So it's not easy. And I don't know how this can be solved. We've tried mediation. No way, nothing has happened. They weren't there to discuss. So we had also the intervention of our regional constitutional advisor, Yasmin Darwich, and nothing happened. She just got back a very strong letter from their group, and nobody's willing to accept that. I mean, as somebody said, we are volunteers. We are women working because we believe in goals, but we are not there as punching balls. So that's a problem I'm experiencing now. The region is experiencing now, but it's going to be solved. We're trying to work for it. It won't be easy. It won't be through mediation, unfortunately, but this is how it goes. And thank you for this incredible webinars. I haven't been all the time, but I see them in YouTube, and I really appreciate, and I thank you, Yasmin and Anne, for this. They're great. Thank you.
Thanks, Diana, for your contribution. Okay, so before I go to you, Francesca, I'd like to ask Bessie to jump in because you were very involved also in everything that Liz talked about. So Bessie, do you have any additional comments to make about the USA issue, crisis, really?
Well, one of the biggest difficulties I found when trying to get the members of USA to rejoin international was the issue of trust. They didn't trust international. Why do we have to do it? We are okay like this. And try to convince them that it is worth their time and their money and their work to join a federation, an international federation. And I think that that also combines with leadership, because the leadership of international has to be welcoming, has to be inclusive, and has to be democratic. And when people see that the organization is going smooth, then they feel like joining it. Otherwise, it is very difficult to tell them, you come back, let's rejoin after being so many. My goal is that we go back to the numbers we used to be, as Liz has said. And thank you, Liz, for all that history that you have given us. Another thing that I want to talk about, Mariela, is the fact that in order to have mediation, you have to have both parties willing to negotiate, because mediation is just negotiation. And if one part does not want to negotiate, you're not going to have mediation. So what you have to do is get both parties to be able to work toward the common goal. And that is what the difficulty sometimes comes with mediation. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bessie.
Can I just very quickly respond to the last comment by
certainly.
Bessie?
Certainly, Mariela, go
That's
ahead.
how we started in our mediation. We started with actually both parties were not really willing to give up anything. They were very staunch in their stand, and they kept saying, no, this is what we want, this is what we're not going to do anything unless we get everything what we want. So this is how we started. It takes time. It takes time and patience, you know, so sometimes they will not change their opinion, but sometimes they do tend to, you can actually find a solution that would work for both. But yes, a lot of times you do find people who, you know, a situation where one side comes to the table and say, no, we're not negotiating, and they will never change their opinion. But sometimes you get lucky and you are able to help them, you know, give something up so they can get something else that they want.
Okay, thanks, Mariela. Thanks, Bessie. All right, Francesca, you were next, and then we have Yasmin, and that's probably all we'll have time for today. But Francesca, now the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anne. And thank you, Anne and Yasmin, for these wonderful webinars, and Liz and Mariela for your contribution today. I think it was really great. And for everyone that spoke today, you know, being a leader is so difficult. There's so many personalities involved, and you have to, you know, adjust and speak to people differently very often, because people hear things differently and learn differently and get excited differently. So being a leader, I don't have to tell anyone on this call, is a very difficult situation. One of the things that I've come to learn over many, many years is how valuable ongoing communication is. We have a tendency sometimes to ignore a situation that we see brewing, and it begins to build and build and build. And then it gets to a point where we're talking about this today. And it's very important as leaders that we really keep that avenue of communication open and try to prevent situations that are going to occur when we see it, not all the time, but we see these little things that turn into gigantic things as they're growing. But when we do, it's really important. And, you know, sometimes I'm a communication expert, and sometimes I say, oh, who the heck wants to deal with this today? You know, and I really don't want to deal with it either. And we all feel like that at different times. But it's really important to step back if you don't feel like dealing with that today, to really step back and get your inner core and your soul ready to deal with it, but don't ignore it, because it just builds and builds. And sometimes we do have to let people go. You know, people that can't really, you know, that was so burnt, like in the USA, you know, sometimes we have to let people go. But before letting people go, it's just like getting a divorce. Before you get divorced, it's important to go into counseling together to solve those issues, not to solve them, but to make sure that, you know, divorce is the only answer. And then either you get divorced or you don't. And I think it's really important before we give up on someone. You know, sometimes people are married for 20 years and then finally do go into counseling and do get divorced, or sometimes can mend the issues. So I think it's important that we do a last try before letting people go, as frustrated as we are. But, you know, there's a time where we have to let people go, and then don't try to get them back. You know, they're too, sometimes it's a cancer. When you bring an organization back into the fold that's really miserable and unhappy, they create a cancer that begins to grow throughout the organization with negativity and all this other angst. You know, sometimes let them go. If they don't see the value, okay. There are millions of women out there that need our help. We don't have to go after people that don't see the value. But we do have to have value for those that are involved. And that's really important. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share my thoughts.
Okay, thanks, Francesca. So Dr. Yasmin will give some final words, and then Liz also has, I guess, some final words, and then we'll wrap up for today. So Yasmin?
Yeah, the question on the table is what happened when one of the parts refused to consult a mediator. And this is one of the parts, and the other that it was mentioned also that when in the leadership position, that means power, the things are manipulated or wrong. So what we can do when the other party just exercise this power, or they just don't want to sit and consult a mediator or even to talk about it.
Thanks for that, Yasmin. Yeah, that's the most difficult situation. Okay, Liz, over to you, and then we're going to have to wrap up for today. It's yours, Liz.
Thanks a lot. Yes. So the importance again is about leadership. As I said before, it is a very loaded word, comes with a lot of responsibility. And I think one of the things that comes through with this is that as a leader, you don't own, you have no ownership over the organization. It is not your special place. You didn't put the money in, you didn't create it. It was created by many, and you have been given the honor to serve, to keep building and moving it forward. That I think is especially important for leadership roles to understand, is that it's a temporary place and you need to leave it in a better place than you got it. That's the mantra that we should be dialing into. Thirdly, I think leadership should always be truthful and transparent. And when we're truthful and transparent and deal with respect, then we get respect, and it is open. It is much healthier to have things that we can discuss openly, transparently. And always we must agree that we can disagree. It is okay to disagree. It is healthy to disagree. But the main thing that comes forward across everybody is that it must be done with respect. And finally, the choice has to be made. We actually have to appeal to the better angels in everybody and to leave everything with kindness, because kindness is a gateway to opening all kinds of discussions, communications, healing, reconciliation, kindness, and respect. And that's what I'd just like to leave everybody with today.
Thanks, Liz. And there's a saying in mediation and in psychology too, that you try to separate with love, but sometimes you have to separate with an axe. So sometimes that final divorce, as Francesca was saying, is the only solution after you've tried everything else. So kindness, yes, but some extreme cases. Okay, so we want to thank our speakers today. First of all, thanks to Liz for your wonderful insight into the huge mess of our original organization, and they're breaking from not only BPW International, but from each other as well. And we hope that some healing can continue to happen there. The pieces probably won't be put back together, but some healing can happen. Thanks to Mariella for sharing all of those wonderful tips that we can apply in any given situation. And Dr. Yasmin, as always, for all of your insights, and everybody in this room. We really appreciate everyone who contributed today and everyone who just came to join us in this process. So we really appreciate that. We do hope that you join us again next month and every month. 2 weeks from now, different project, but intergenerational dialogue in BPW will take place. So just look for that on Facebook or contact me if you don't find it, but you will. And we just hope that you all have a lovely day, as hot as it may be where you are, or if you're down below the equator, it might be getting cold by now. So lovely day to all of you. And thanks again for being here with us. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone. Great seeing you.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
bye, ladies.
Bye.